Welcome to MissouriNet.com. I'm Bill Pollock. We continue our countdown to Mizzou's season opener against South Dakota State. And joining us is John Cooper from SaturdayDownSouth.com to kind of preview the SEC East for us. John, always a pleasure to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm excited. We're just a few days away from kickoff, and just a couple days away from the start of SEC football with that big game at South Carolina. So it's always an exciting time of year, and I love your website, love what you guys do, and so I thought it'd be great if we could just talk about maybe the top headline for each of the teams in the SEC East, and we'll go right down alphabetical order. I'll start with Florida. You can give me the top headline, but my first question, and maybe this is it, is this a do-or-die season for Will Muschamp?
Well, I think it absolutely is, and I think if you're Florida, on a positive note, you have to look at the talent that you've already amassed on the roster. You have to look at the positive, bringing in a new offensive coordinator, Kurt Roper, who his offense actually fits the personnel much better than what we've seen the last couple of years. It fits Jeff Driscoll, the quarterback. So absolutely, I think Will Muschamp probably enters on the hottest seat in all of college football. The good news is the SEC East is there for the taking. There's not one dominant team in there, and I think if you're Florida, it bodes well. You know you're going to have an elite defense. So then it comes down to producing on the offensive side of the ball. They've made an offensive coordinator change that fits the personnel much better, in my opinion. I actually think Florida has the opportunity to become one of the biggest turnaround teams in college football.
And, much like Missouri. I mean, Missouri went through a bunch of injuries, 2 years ago, and so there was question marks about them. They made the big turnaround. Yeah, absolutely. Is Jeff Driscoll the type of guy that can pick up an offense in an offseason like this if it fits that system? I mean, is he the guy that can get the job done?
I really think so. I think from a physical standpoint, you got to love everything about him. It's been more of the intangibles. Is he really a gamer? I mean, that's what it boils down to. We've seen guys that look terrible in practice. They get in the game, something clicks with them. And because they're just gamers, they love the competition. They rise to the biggest stage. To me, that's the biggest question about Driscoll. It's not the physical. He can make all the throws. He can digest the offense. To me, it's about simplifying his decision-making back there, using his running ability, which I think is his best asset as a quarterback, and furthermore, kind of simplifying his reads and letting him make quicker decisions back there. So I think this offense fits him a little bit better, and we're going to see furthermore, whether or not, he has the intangibles to become the quarterback everybody thought out of high school.
John Cooper, SaturdayDownSouth.com, joining us. We're previewing the SEC East. All right, on to Georgia. They had some injury problems in the beginning of the year, and it just got worse, and it got uglier. Things they ran into some bad luck. What's the big thing from the Bulldogs this year?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to love what you have on the offensive side of the ball. Even though you don't have Aaron Murray, who's going to throw for 3,800 yards every year, you got Hudson Mason, who's a veteran quarterback who got some game experience last year for when Murray went down with a knee injury. So I think, having those first 3 games or so under his belt gives him some confidence headed into this year. And, looking at the players around him, the offensive line should be okay. The backfield is absolutely loaded with Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall. They have a couple freshmen in there who can make an instant impact. To me, it comes down to the defense and the secondary. Georgia was about 2 missed tackles last year from being the worst defense in the conference. They had a lot of communication issues in the secondary. It was just overall really confusing for this team. So they bring in a guy like Jeremy Pruitt, won a national championship last year, defensive coordinator at Florida State. Who's going to simplify things, hopefully get those guys in the secondary. They face some attrition too, so in my mind, it's all about the secondary and how the defense can pick up their level of play. The offense is going to score enough points to win an SEC championship. To me, it comes down to the defense and whether or not they can gel as a unit under their new coordinator.
All right, jump around a little bit. I was going to go in alphabetical order, but we'll skip Kentucky toward the end here. Let's go to South Carolina. Many predicting them to win the SEC East. What are your thoughts on that prediction, and then what do you see from the Gamecocks this year?
I think from a stability standpoint, South Carolina is a good pick right now. I mean, they haven't been a hot and cold program over the last couple of years. They've been slow and steady, 3 straight 11-win seasons. ironically, the last 3 years when they did win 11 games, they beat the SEC East Division winner in all 3 seasons. Last year happened to be Missouri, and they stayed at home. They were watching the SEC championship the same place we were, from the couch. So you look at this deal, and Steve Spurrier feels really good about this coming into the season. I think he feels really good about his offense. He's got a strong offensive line. He's got adequate receivers. He's got a veteran quarterback in Dylan Thompson who's got some experience. Arguably, Mike Davis is the best running back in the conference. You know, they lose Jadeveon Clowney. They lose some pieces on defense, particularly in the secondary is probably the biggest concern right now. It's the linebacking corps is really talented. They're going to play really well against the run. It's going to be about the pass, and against the secondary, they're going to be faced right out of the gate against Texas A&M with a wide open offense.
All right, before we get to Missouri and wrap things up, let's lump in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, because I think when you look at it from Mizzou's perspective, John, you're going to be battling with South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and then you'd expect those other teams, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, to be below you. Do you agree with that assessment?
You know, I do. I think all three of those teams are going to be fighting for bowl eligibility this year. I think Kentucky is going to miss on a bowl. Vanderbilt actually has the schedule to get to a bowl game, depending. And I think the big swing game there is Tennessee, which, you know, they beat Tennessee the last 2 years, which is just unheard of. I mean, you know, the Vol Nation are going nuts right now because Vanderbilt beat them 2 years in a row, and rightfully so. I mean, that just kind of explains what they're facing right now, a rebuilding program. I do think Tennessee has a superior ceiling compared to those other two teams, but I still think Tennessee is a year away from even competing bowl eligibility in my mind. Tennessee is probably on the edge of those three teams of making a bowl team, but you're right. I think that's probably the three teams that are going to finish last in the SEC East this year. But I do think Tennessee has a lot of promise for the future, and they're building a nice core of young talent right now. They're going to compete for the division within the next couple of years.
All right, let's go on to Missouri, and I'll ask you two simple questions. The first one is, what do you like about Missouri?
Well, I think first and foremost, their ability to bounce back last year when they stayed healthy. And I think a lot of people were writing them, obviously they're writing them off prior to last season. You had a very veteran unit. So I think Matty Malk has showed enough to get you excited about the offense. There's enough pieces at the receiver position to really put together to catch passes. I think the offensive line is veteran. They got 3 returning starters. Evan Bam at center. I absolutely love that guy. He's an animal. The backfield's going to be fine. The best thing they have going for them right now is going to be the defensive line. Even though they lost Michael Sam, Coney Ely, I mean, you know, Marcus Golden, and these guys are going to come. Shane Ray, they're going to come, and Charles Harris is another one to watch. I mean, they're going to bring it on the defensive line, and I think that's the best thing they have going for them right now. There's a couple questions in the secondary, but I think what we've seen on offense from Matty Malk, there's enough to get excited there. I think the defensive line is going to be really strong again. And if you learned anything about the SEC the last couple of years, you want to be built from the inside out, and that's something Missouri has going for them right now.
And actually, that was my next point, John, was that that's what I've heard. I mean, the offensive line, defensive line, if you can win those battles, you can have a lot of success. And then the other key is being able to run the football. And Mizzou was, you know, one of the top teams, if not the top team at running the football in the East. So given those things, where do you see Mizzou shaking out in this division?
Well, I think there's 4 teams right now that could win the division. And we talked about Georgia, South Carolina, Florida. I think Missouri is thrown into that mix. I think the biggest reason for them competing for the division, again, obviously they proved it last year. They lost some key pieces, but at the same time, there's so much parity in the SEC East right now. There's not one team that really jumps out and says, you know what, they're going to win the division. And I think from what we've seen the last couple of years with even Auburn in the West, Missouri in the East last year, it showed us anything can happen. And one team catches fire down the stretch, it's going to push them through to Atlanta. So I think the parity within the SEC East right now probably makes them a major player, obviously. If you had to ask me right now where they stack up, I'd probably put them 4 behind Florida. I think Florida has probably the best opportunity to be a dark horse candidate in the East, but Missouri is too. So, you know, for that reason, heading into this season with the pieces that they've lost, I probably like Missouri 4th in the East.
Here's what concerns me about their schedule. I think they get a break compared to the other SEC teams because they're going to start with South Dakota State, Toledo, Central Florida, Indiana, all non-conference games, which I think kind of lets you build into your season. But then their first three SEC games are at South Carolina, at home against Georgia, and at Florida. I mean, that's brutal. That's basically your division right there. I mean, they're going to know by October 18th, if not sooner, whether or not they're in this thing.
I completely agree with you. And I think while at the same time the non-conference schedule does let them wade through the waters, kind of feel out their team a little bit, see what pieces, see what their strength is, and identifying the actual playmakers that are going to win you football games, that's huge. But don't sleep on UCF. I mean, they got 10 of 11s turning on defense. So that's going to be a really interesting game. Obviously, that game's in Columbia this year, but you're right. I mean, that's murderer's row. At South Carolina, Georgia, at Florida is just a brutal three-game stretch. Obviously, Vanderbilt after that, so you can't sleep on Vanderbilt either. But you're looking for some of the toughest three-game stretches in the country. That's just brutal right there.
And Toledo last year gave Mizzou, a little bit of a run for their money here into the second half. So, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy non-conference schedule, but we'll see how that plays out. John Cooper, SaturdayDownSouth.com. Let me try to call up your website here. Let me see if I can get a screenshot of this and at least share this with everybody. So you can get all the team's news. You just click on the different icons there. And now, so tell her, how many schools do you specifically cover and write for?
Well, I mean, we cover all four teams, all 14 teams in the SEC, and so
you're involved with all.
Absolutely, we're involved with every single one of them. We have team writers for every single one of them, as well as an SEC-wide perspective too. So, it's kind of a passion that we're born into the SEC country, and we kind of funnel all that passion on Saturday Down South and in a digital view for the audience. And we have the best fans, the best readers in the country. We love interacting with them.
Well, John, we love having you with us, and we hope that we can continue to do this throughout the season with you, if you don't mind coming back a handful of times.
Take care, Bill.
All right, thanks a lot. John Cooper from Saturday Down South here at MissouriNet.com. Thanks for watching.